Hello, my name is Tshidi Madia, Associate Editor, Politics at Eyewitness News. So the story that's caught my attention this week, it's going to be with us for a while. So it was with us over the weekend. I think it will still be with us in the coming days. And I think it's going to continue for a very long time. It is the Phala Phala farm saga, not Phala Phala. I don't know why they've taken so long to correct us, but Phala Phala. Over the weekend, acting public protector advocate Gcaleka's preliminary report into the Phala Phala saga was leaked to the media. Now, before I even deal with the issue of the report in and of itself, let me very quickly say, I understand this issue with it being leaked and the rest of us running it. I understand that the Public Protector Act does say that it's not a final report and it shouldn't be out and about in the public domain. But here's the thing, right? Here's the thing. Hear me out. One, it was leaked by interested parties. We don't manufacture these things as members of the media. They want us to know for a reason what's in that document. Two, it is in the public interest. This is about the head of state and whether or not he's violated the executive member's code, his ethics in essence, and whether he's still fit for purpose as far as surveillance is concerned, right? Because here's a man who's been accused of moonlighting, but we'll get into that a little bit later. Thirdly, I also think that the parties involved have spoken about it. So that's kind of my rationale around this moment and me speaking about the contents of that public protector's report. So ultimately, now to get into the report, she deals with multiple things. So she deals with that issue of does the president do other work outside of being president of the republic? And as you know, I have expressed a lot of frustration with a man who's at the helm who doesn't seem to want to lead. Like, what is that favor? He's not interested in us. So then you hear about the farm, and you've often heard him make public utterance about how much he loves farming, how much he is a farmer, and then, you know, the jokes of the Ankole society about how that's his preference, you know, like, oh, we take a back seat. So I think that the question around him moonlighting is a legitimate question. Then there's an issue around the conflict of interest. Has the president put himself in a position where his activities, his personal interests, are in conflict with his role as head of state? So she looked at those things and she cleared them of both, saying that there's no substantial evidence to show anything. There's nothing tangible really in the evidence she looked at. A lot of this report, in terms of what it's based on in the investigation, is of course that criminal complaint that was laid by Arthur Fraser against the president. Remember, the claims of money laundering came from there. The claims of torture came from the kidnapping. That back and forth around the Namibian angle to the story, where the people who stole from the president ended up there, and then the diplomatic involvement as well stems really from the 2020 February housebreaking that happened on his farm. So she delves into that. She also deals with how the police handled the Phala Phala burglary, and she actually finds the police wanting. So she has an issue with how they've conducted the investigation, calling it improper. She speaks about General Wally Wode and how she didn't find evidence that he told a commander. So she has no issue with the president telling Wally, look, this has happened. In fact, for her, that's sufficient to say that's a matter being reported to the police. But she then says she can't connect to whether Wally Wode has told somebody higher than him, and the person who could probably give that evidence is unfortunately deceased. So there are question marks about what Wally Wode did. Speaks about an unofficial investigation of the burglary, however was then told it was a preliminary investigation as well as an analysis as far as the threats to the president is concerned. She doesn't necessarily buy into that. She does make a recommendation about what the police need to do better as far as a policy position, as far as dealing with the VIPs is concerned. What do you do when there are criminal matters around these high-profile politicians? So she says that needs to be done. Also, she speaks about disciplinary action against somebody like Wode in terms of how he acted, and not just him. Sergeant Kulani Rihoto is also part and parcel of those that she believes some sort of action must be taken against because of their report and what happened. But the thing about this report is not just about what's contained in it, it's how it's going to be received. But I must very, very quickly say, I think the difficulty with the investigation was the issue of jurisdiction. See, she's a Chapter 9 institution. She deals with public money. The money involved in the Phala Phala saga is not you and I's money. It's not our money. However, she does come into the picture because the president is a constitutional being. He is our president. I think in trying to navigate and to give us the answers that we require and to find out whether or not the president should be found wanting, a lot of the parameters, jurisdictions about the role of her Chapter 9 office versus all the other officers that are involved in currently dealing with this Phala Phala saga became part and parcel of what hampered her. So she could only go so far, and I think I understand it to a degree, but I think there's still lots of gaps, She didn't want to look into the South African Revenue Services matter. I know the DA had asked her to do so because she says, again, that's a different jurisdiction. But if you recall, at some point in the past week or so, the South African Revenue Services did come out saying that the president has given it leeway, given it some room to declare about his taxes, telling us that he's tax compliant, so is the farm. I don't know if I'm satisfied with that from SARS, by the way, because that wasn't the question, right? SARS came out saying there's no record of Mustafa declaring those dollars as he came into the country. I accept that, but where are the records about what happened with that money when it got to the farm? And we don't have that answer from the SARS. We're told that tax compliant. Again, it doesn't move far enough. So ultimately, a lot of the criticism around this particular report being seen as narrow, I accept and I understand why it's narrow. She only had so much room to maneuver. People even take issue with her definition of work because she says he's not at Phala Phala day to day. So you can't necessarily say he's working at Phala Phala. People feel slightly differently about her interpretation of it, and I think that leaves room for a lot more questions. And if the final report is anything like this, I think it also leaves room for it to be taken to the courts and be challenged and possibly successfully challenged. But of course, that depends on the argument that's put forward. I had an issue with her saying, that the issue of SARS or the South African Revenue Services or even the Specialized Policing Unit, the Hawks, because they're all undertaking their own different investigations. I had an issue with her then saying, those are taking place elsewhere. Those are different jurisdictions. I almost wish she'd waited. We waited almost a year. What harm would there have been if she waited a little bit longer for those outcomes so that they also inform her final product? I don't know if that makes sense. So I have a little bit of an issue with that. But this was always going to be political. Make no mistake. I think ATM and DA going to the public protector in the first place was a political play, nothing more. For me, it was politics. They understand the jurisdiction. They understand how hard it would have been for it to maneuver particular dictates that were set for office by the constitution of the country. So I'm not surprised that even before the final report was out, people are incredibly unhappy. I don't know a political party that's happy with the outcome, but of course a lot of people are not willing to say too much because again, this is a preliminary report. What's going to happen in the coming days is those implicated, all the parties that are interested and involved in this particular investigation were given 10 days. So in the coming days, they will say their piece, and ultimately it will shape the final report that you and I will see lawfully and speak about when the time is right. Hopefully we're not too far from it. Again, I understand what got in her way, but I think it's not enough. I think she didn't go far enough with the investigation. The DA is still pushing for an ad hoc committee. I think that's actually one of the best ways to deal with it because the ad hoc committee is empowered to also then speak to the different institutions that are dealing with this matter for a little bit more clarity for all of us to understand what's really going on. Remember there was that independent panel report. So you can also look at the things that the hurdles, if you may, that this Phala Phala saga has jumped over. There was the independent panel report, which was damning on the president and found a case could possibly be made for impeachment, but the ANC again used its might and blocked that from happening. We had SARS telling us that the president is tax compliant. That's not necessarily what we were asking. And then now you've got the public protector who clears him because her parameters, in essence, don't allow her to go far enough. I know politically people say, so she's doing it so that she can become the public protector. Remember, Gcaleka is the acting public protector. She's the deputy public protector. And Muslim Kwewa, his term of office comes to an end in a few months' time. So people think that she's trying to buy her way to that office. I don't think it's about that. I think politics will have us saying any and everything to make a point. Because people also say, she's a Cyril Ramaphosa ally, that's why she'll get him scot-free. I think look at the report, maybe wait for the final one, but look at the report and then look at the constitution and make a comparison between that. Is there room that she might have made a mistake? Well, absolutely. They want to make an argument, the public protector's office, of course, without talking to us much about the report, that they have taken to heart the many times that office has been hauled before the courts and they've been found wanting, and made sure that they stick literally to the dictates of the constitution But only time will tell. Again, I believe at the end of the day, if the report doesn't change too much when it's in its final form, it might be challenged in court and might be done so successfully. But let's wait and see. But for now, what you're going to see is political theater. Yes, it's politics galore, because this is yet another tool to be used by the opposition in the lead up to elections. Never forget, a lot of what you're seeing is not about the now. It's not even just about the issue. While the issue does matter, because we need to know if our president is fully committed to serving this country, or he cares more about being a farmer. In fact, we must also check how many of those people in our parliament are farmers, but that's a conversation for a different day. I think a lot of things are going to be used against us in the name of 2024's general election. So you've got to be really careful and scrutinize everything thoroughly, be it for or against the president, be it his actions or non-action for that matter. I am sure I'll be talking to you soon.
Cheers.